Are you in the market for a new car? With average monthly payments for new and used vehicles steadily rising, ACMi producer Josh Guicherit sat down with auto finance expert Bobby Steenbergh for some tips about how to prepare for the big purchase.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to my discussion today with Bobby Steenbergh, who is an consumer auto finance expert in the field. We're going to be having a longer discussion today about vehicle financing, what you can expect when you go and get a car loan, and maybe some tips and tricks for dealing with what we all see as rising costs in the industry. So, Bobby, before we dive in, thank you so much for being here and talking today. I'd love for you to share just a little bit of background of your expertise in the field, why we're talking to you specifically today.
Certainly. Thank you for the invitation. Been in the automotive business about 30 years after starting out as a trial attorney. I've had two automotive software companies and now an automotive payments company. So over the last, like I said, 28, 30 years, I've seen, the ups and downs and sideways of all the different auto finance, booms and busts and, the rises and the falls of the interest rates and how the markets responded and as well as the ongoing changes in the dealership world over that same 30 years.
And so you talked a little bit right now about how things have kind of fluctuated a lot for people. Average monthly costs are, higher for new and used vehicles. What has led us to get to this point in the country? Like, what are some of the causes that brought us to dealing with this market that we're dealing with?
Well, like you said, the average monthly payments are all-time high. 25% of the payments now are over $1,000. The average payment is somewhere in the $700 to $800 neighborhood. So, it's a significant, rise from, I remember when people would say we'd never get to $500 a payment.
Yeah.
That wasn't that many years ago. A lot of factors have kind of caused the perfect storm of where we are now. Obviously inflation and some of the interest rates ticking up a little bit, but surprisingly, that's not, a major factor as much as the fact that, somewhere after COVID, American manufacturers especially stopped making the smaller and more affordable, family sedans.
Mm-hmm.
The average new car price right now is about $50,000. And, that's right at the level of it's a luxury item, which, yeah, for some people, a car is a luxury item, but for a lot of people, it's a necessity.
Yeah.
So there are some manufacturers out there, the Korean manufacturers, some of the lower end, Toyota or Nissan models, you can still get down in that, 35,000 range or so to where you could get a payment that's, affordable. At the same time, as, inflation's, pretty good right now. It wasn't previously. So a lot of people got stretched on their budgets to where I think 60+% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. So at the time when you're on basically a fixed income, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, the car prices go up astronomically and don't come back down. And the only way the market's responded to that is by extending the term farther and farther out. So the vast majority of people that walk out of the dealership today are payment buyers. They don't even really care what the interest rate is. They just say, hey, I can afford $650, $750 a month. What do I need to do to do that? Well, 40% of the loans now are 84 months. And there's a couple of banks doing 96 months.
Wow.
So that's a long time to own a depreciating asset.
You mentioned that some companies that offer cheaper options. That is, those are not American-made cars. Is there a reason why American-made cars and trucks and vehicles are impacted differently?
I don't know why Detroit made that decision, other than, the top end of the market's always going to be recession-proof.
Mm-hmm.
The best selling vehicle in the country for, 40 or 50 years now has been a pickup truck.
Right.
People need them, they want them, they're expensive. At some point, I guess they just made the decision that, there wasn't enough profit in the lower end vehicles, and they switched the lines to just build the bigger ones. And I haven't seen anybody really make any comments about, well, maybe we should go back to building some of those lower end models. So I just have to believe that they don't think the margin's there and they're making enough on the expensive ones. I mean, $120,000 pickup trucks probably got a pretty good margin on it.
Right. Yeah. And something else that we're seeing now that we're dealing with now is the boom of electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. When you're looking at the numbers for rising costs, do you also see that impacting electric and hybrid vehicles as well?
Well, until very recently, when the gas prices started to go back up some, the penetration of electric vehicles was actually going down. I mean, you have all of the major manufacturers writing off billions and billions of dollars in losses because of electronic vehicles. All of the manufacturers that said we're going to be totally electric by 2030 have now entirely abandoned those plans.
Right.
It's still going to be a segment of the market. The charging network across the country has gotten to be a lot better than it was. So that's not quite the issue that it used to be. But you're still stuck with the problem of the range of the vehicles.
Hmm.
If you can only go a couple hundred miles reliably, and everything affects it, whether it's too hot or it's too cold, or you can get in the car and it says, oh, you have 80%, and then you start going faster and faster, and it eats up more and more. It's now you're down to 130. You know,
Right.
if
Yeah.
you bought an electric truck in Florida, in Orlando, where I live, you would not be able to tow a boat to either coast
Interesting.
without recharging.
Right.
So, a lot of that was driven by tax subsidies. The
Hmm.
tax subsidies are gone, and now you see everybody going the other way, or at least taking a half step pivot back to the hybrid model, which is
Hmm.
actually a much better idea because it does increase the gas mileage, especially the self-charging ones.
Hmm.
So you do get better mileage out of it, so you can save some money on the gas, and it's a reliable vehicle. It's not gonna get stuck somewhere because the charger wasn't around.
Right. So talking about all those different kinds of vehicles, let's dive into, I think, talking about car payments and the loans themselves. What's something that someone should consider when, in regards to their own personal finances, when they're taking out car payments, when they're going through these? What is the ideal circumstance that you think people can set themselves up for to go into this situation?
Well, they need to be honest with themselves about what their personal situation is. You got your wants and your needs, and what's left over is supposed to be either savings or debt reduction. Um, Figure out what amount you can comfortably afford for a car payment, and stick to that number when you get to the dealership, and start looking at all the bright shiny objects.
Mhm.
But also keep in mind, you really need to start and educate yourself on what's the total cost of ownership of that vehicle. So that's not just the car payment, that's going to be your insurance, that's going to be gas, and that's going to be repairs. So, if you need to commute 40, 50 miles, a day, I wouldn't recommend some giant gas guzzler.
Mhm.
There's going to be a whole lot of extra expense. If you don't have to drive that much in your metropolitan area like yourself, then you got to worry about things like insurance because it's going to be much higher in those areas.
Yeah.
So you really need to check into all those factors before you go to the dealership, because if you think you can afford $600 a month, that $600 is not just going to be your car payment. That's going to be those other items as well. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself going more and more into debt.
There's a lot of other kind of ideas around splitting your income and having like certain percentages or portions that you save for different things. Is there something like that for the car payment plan or
Yeah, there's in a perfect vacuum, there's those things like, your housing's not supposed to be more than 35%. I think your car is probably not supposed to be more than 20.
Mhm.
But people that are living paycheck to paycheck, those ratios are probably already all out of whack.
Right.
Um, so you want to do the smartest thing in the shortest term. So if you're kind of struggling now, maybe instead of going to get a new car, if you have to get a car, maybe you'll get a used one or a certified pre-owned one, where
Hmm.
there's going to be a good quality vehicle that's still going to have a manufacturer warranty on it. It's going to be a lot less money, and it's going to lower your payment. Maybe that's really the best idea for you for the next 3 or 4 years. Or maybe if you can qualify credit wise, go lease a vehicle. All right. You're never going to own it. You're never going to drive it into the ground, but you're going to have a lower payment. You're not going to have any cost of maintenance because generally that's included in leases. And 3, 4 years from now, maybe your career is in a better place and you've gotten a couple of raises, or you've paid down some debt, or you paid off a student loan or something or other. There's no sense adding to the debt burden by buying a car that's really a stretch for you at this point.
One of the things that you had mentioned previously was the insurance and reminding ourselves to think about the insurance and how that is going to change on getting a new vehicle, getting a used vehicle. How does that also change for leasing out a vehicle instead of going and outright buying one?
Well, you're going to have to get higher in limits on a lease. Um, you're not going to get the bare minimum. They're going to want you to get what they call 100, 300, which is, high levels of liability. But,
Mhm.
you're basically owning a vehicle or driving a vehicle that the bank owns. So they're going to want to be covered. Um, Find out what that matters in the monthly payment. Maybe it's $100 a month in your insurance, but you're saving $300 a month in the payment. And it's a good trade-off.
So I'm actually in a situation right now where I have had my own vehicle that I bought from a family friend. I've never had issues with it. I've never had to get a new vehicle. I've never had to consider leasing something up until the point where it is now at the last legs of its life, and I'm looking to potentially purchase something. We talked about a number of challenges that can come up. What are some new ways that people can tackle those challenges, that people can be prepared to go in and have that conversation? Because I don't have any kind of auto background and I've never done this before. What should I be prepared for when I go out on the lot?
Well, the first question is, what do you need the vehicle for? Like I
Mm,
said, you live in a metropolitan area. How much are you going to drive really? What's it going to cost you to park this thing someplace? Um, you know, do you, do you have a family? Do you have, what size vehicle do you need? I doubt you need a pickup truck for any reason. Um, Figure out exactly kind of what the use of the vehicle is going to be for. And that'll
mhm.
kind of give you an idea of, what type of vehicle maybe is a good fit for you. And then you start doing the research on the things that are in that segment. So say you decided that, hey, like one of those little mini crossover SUVs would be good for me. Then you start doing the research on those, which ones are the best rated, which ones, you can go to Edmunds will tell you what the exact total cost of ownership is for each vehicle. So go there and check, find out what they say. They know what the repair histories are for all those vehicles.
Mhm.
So start there and be educated when you go to the dealership. Use go online to the dealership's website and use their calculator that's on there that'll estimate what the payment should be.
Right.
Now figure that's going to be just for the vehicle. And you're probably going to want to add some finance and insurance products when you get there. Like if you like yourself like to keep vehicles forever, you should get the extended warranty, right? Because you're going to keep it forever.
Right.
If there's going to be a big gap between what you finance and what the vehicle is going to be worth, because it's going to be worth about 20% less the second you drive it off the lot,
Mhm.
you might want to look at gap insurance, which would protect you financially if you had an accident the day after you bought the car. Well, the insurance company is going to pay you the value of the car the day after you bought it. You're going to owe the other 20% yourself. And that's what gap insurance covers.
Gotcha.
Again, if you drive in the Northeast a lot where you have a lot of potholes, you might want to look at tire and wheel coverage.
Yes, I
So,
definitely need that here. I hit a few potholes on my way into work.
so if it really have to personalize the situation and the vehicle and the products to what makes the most sense for you. And then you have to figure, okay, what payment can I afford? And, what do I see my situation being in 4 years? Am I going to be a lot better financially off? Then let's just find a short-term finance solution for me or a lease for me, or do it on a term to where I know that I won't be in a negative finance equity position when I take the vehicle back in 4 years because I've made enough payments to where I'm not totally underwater when I trade the vehicle back in.
And can you explain just a little bit for the audience what a negative finance,
Sure.
equity finance position is?
So negative equity is say you bought the car today for $50,000 and you wanted to trade it in 3 years, and they said, well, you know, it's worth $20,000, but you owe 30. So you have a $10,000 negative equity position. So you can do two things there. Either you can come up with a lot more money down on the next vehicle,
Mm.
or you can finance it on as much as that negative equity into the next loan as the bank will let you, which is
Okay.
which is going on right now far too often. And there's a negative equity crisis in the country as well, to where the average negative equity coming back is somewhere between $6,000 and $7,000, 30 or 40% of the trade-ins.
Oh, wow.
So you get into this death spiral of
Right.
just refinancing more and more negative equity. So you're really not just financing the new vehicle, you're financing the financing you had for the last vehicle you just traded in.
So one of the questions that I had that I wanted to bring up about dealerships specifically, things that you can be prepared for when you're going in. Do you, as a customer, have any bargaining power? Do you have anything that you can negotiate while you are in these conversations with dealers?
Yeah, you can always negotiate the sticker price on the car.
Mm,
Um, sometimes there are incentives, sometimes there's not, but you can always negotiate the sticker price. You can always, people don't really know this. You can negotiate the interest rate. There's
mm,
the interest. If the dealer comes back and tells you the interest rate is 8, the interest rate is probably 6 from the bank, and he's probably keeping 2 himself.
uh,
So it's what they call reserve. You can always negotiate that as well. A lot of dealers have these, insane $1,000 dealer fees.
yeah,
You can negotiate those. They'll tell you they won't, but you can negotiate anything in there.
right.
And at the end of the day, especially if it's towards the end of the month, you can negotiate a lot because they're going to want to get the month closed, with the highest possible vehicle count that they can.
Right. And for the people that are living in, I know in Arlington, in my community here, we have uh, I don't know if you call it a luxury, but we do have the abundance of dealerships and places
Sure.
that people can go to, negotiate and also consider other options as they move through. In places that are more of a desert, where they don't necessarily have as many um, dealers that are around. uh, is there a recommended number that you have of like different places that you should go? Is there a number of things that you can do, especially when the pool is so limited?
Well, no dealer wants you to leave the lot the first time you're there because they know if you're actually looking for a vehicle, you're going to buy one within 72 hours.
Wow, within 72 hours. Okay.
So they know if they let you leave the lot, you're going to go down the street to somebody else. Now, in a
Interesting.
rural area, maybe you got to drive 10, 15 miles. The first guy still doesn't want to give the next guy a shot.
Okay, so when it's time to go in, know that everyone is going to try and keep you there for
Yeah.
that. So you want to go in with the mindset of I've already vetted this dealership for something.
And know exactly, what your number is.
Hmm.
So I'm going to spend X. I can't go beyond that or I'm going to get myself in, financial trouble. And if he can't get me to that, then I'm going to have to go down the street and find somebody who can.
Right.
I mean, a dealer, if you're between, $600 and $625 on a payment, he's not going to let you walk out the door over $25.
Right. And when you're in those negotiations and those talks, are there any things like hidden fees, like things that people wouldn't consider when they're like doing those things, having those talks and being in those negotiations? Because I imagine what gets a lot of people is just the sheer amount of density of the contract, of the numbers of things to consider, that they aren't aware of all the parts and pieces, and that's another cost that can come in and impact the final result.
Well, you have to know when you're out front, negotiating the price of the car, you haven't really spoken to the business manager or the F&I manager yet, and those are the ones that are going to ask you if you want the extended service contract.
Mhm.
So, so if it says 600, and you're like, oh, good, I'm at 600. That's my number, 600. Well, that might just get you the car. So, you better be prepared to add another, 50 to
Right.
$100 to it for the things that you're going to need to add to it in the F&I office. And I know a lot of people think the F&I office is just, where a lot of theft and fraud goes on.
It's the
But like I
upcharge.
said, things like a service contract or gap or tire and wheel, I mean, those are very valuable products that protect you. And again, you can negotiate. And in some states, you can't negotiate the price of those because they're fixed by the state.
Mm.
They're called what they call filed rate states. But the vast majority of them, you can, if they tell you that's $695 for the tire and wheel, you can negotiate it. They might not budge, but you can certainly try.
Yeah. And you definitely, if it's going to help your bottom line, then you
Yeah.
absolutely should try. Yeah.
But the thing is, like, if they'll say, okay, well, what payment are you trying to get to? The next thing they're going to do is they're going to try to extend that term.
Mm, okay.
So, and again, if that's what you have to do to get what you need,
Right.
that's what you have to do. But I would recommend, if you got anything beyond, you know, the 48-month term or something or other, you should be making additional payments towards the vehicle along the way to
Mm,
reduce the negative equity and increase the value of the vehicle at trade-in. So the vast majority of the country is paid either weekly or biweekly.
Yes.
And, if you make, let's say, $500 every 2 weeks, if you pay half of your car payment every time you get that $500, you end up making 13 monthly payments through the course of the year because there's 26 weeks in the year. So every time you do that, you're taking another, every $500 a year, it's accelerated equity in the vehicle. So when you go to trade that back in the 3 or 4 years, you could be $3,000, $4,000 in a better position than if you just made the monthly payment.
That's huge. Yeah.
And most people can afford that because that's their paycheck sequence. So if the car payment's $600 a month, instead of waiting to take $600 out of the last check of the month, you take $300 out each one.
Right.
And then twice a year, you're going to hit 2 months with 3 Fridays, and you're going to pay, an extra payment. I mean, you're not going to feel it, but you will when you go to trade the car in 4 years later, and you'll shorten the term of that loan by 10, 12, 15%.
That's a fantastic tip for anyone listening to be able to be aware of. If you pay more now, or if it feels like cutting in a little bit more in your check now, it's going to help you so much more in the long run because you're already taking care of what is depreciating.
Yeah, and the more and more you pay down the principal on that depreciating asset, the less and less there is for interest to accrue. So you're going to have an interest reduction as well.
That's yeah, I think that's one of the best tips. If you take anything away, take that away. Bobby, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I don't believe so. Like I said, I think the vast majority of automotive purchases in the country are, impulse purchases.
Yes.
People have to understand that when they go to the dealership, they need to understand what they can afford in their own personal circumstances and be honest with themselves, and don't go, well, I'll just come up with the extra 500 a month somehow, like there's a magic genie in a bottle someplace.
Right.
They just have to be, do the research ahead of time, figure out the total cost of the vehicle, total cost of ownership, and then go make a deal that makes sense for you. And, hopefully 3, 4, 5 years down the road, if you're not in the best position now, you will be then. And, you can go buy the $120,000 pickup truck then.
Right. Yeah. So do the research, give it time, no rash decisions, and consider all the technical elements that we've kind of talked about today as you're going off to make whatever car purchases you might hopefully need, but also want. Well, Bobby, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. Until we see you next time, I've been Josh Guicherit with ACMi News. See you next time.